Hello there. Using the correct pronouns will not stop a Russian ballistic nuke or a Chinese hypersonic missile. Now, just before I start, my channel co-pilot has put out a new video on the royal family. Link in the descriptions box below. Well, in the last 48 hours or so, we've seen the Russians launch an advanced nuclear ballistic missile and the Chinese launch a hypersonic ship-busting missile. And President Putin has already demonstrated during the Russia-Ukraine war that Russia has working hypersonic missiles that pack a punch. And China launched a nuclear-capable hypersonic glide vehicle last August, and it flew undetected around the world in low orbit. And Russia has this capability too. Now, on the ground, the Russian military machine might be rusty in metal and in the brains behind it, but it is a big and blunt instrument, and when applied in a concentrated manner, it can pummel away until victory is achieved. And that job is made easier if it has advanced missile systems that can A. be used to cow the West into inaction, and B. be used without hindrance to hit selected targets on the ground. And right now, Russia has tested its latest ballistic missile that it hopes will instill fear in the West, while already having used, albeit sparingly, hypersonic missiles that can strike at will in Ukraine. These weapons give Putin the space within which his clunky tanks and artillery can bludgeon an enemy despite its losses. And China is watching this to see how it can apply the same against Taiwan. And Russia developed those weapons and maintains a massive army, navy and air force with a GDP that ranks, or did rank before sanctions, 11th in the world. But when looking at GDP per capita, Russia lies in 57th place or thereabouts. Not good for the ordinary Ivan. Now, there's a difference between developing these weapons and manufacturing enough of them. Weapons of these sort are extremely expensive to churn out. And with a ballistic nuclear missile, you also need the multiple targeted re-entry vehicle, MIRV, the warheads that can defeat defences. Without that, the missile is pure junk. So for Russia, it could be Putin emulating Hitler's grand plans for game-changing shiny new weapons that either never materialised or so few of them could be made by a failing Germany to be of much use. But with the size of its GDP, China might be a different kettle of fish to Russia. But I'm getting the uncomfortable impression that in certain areas, such as hypersonic missiles, we in the West have been far too complacent and are now possibly a decade or two behind. And most of our politicians are too involved in woke navel-gazing to be much bothered about threats to this nation. Some even think that you and I that live here are the enemy. And they hope that by ignoring the defence problem it will go away. Either that or they're not much worried by a China and Russia dominated globe in the future. Well, looking at some of them, I think they'd welcome it with open arms. Until too late, the reality hits home. With Corbyn, in my estimation, being one of these. He wants to shut military coalitions like NATO down, and had he been able to do that a few years ago, he would have argued that Putin would have felt safe and stayed at home. But in the opinion of others, if NATO wasn't there, Putin would be having a field day hoovering up European real estate right now. And the French and German governments are hoping that Ukraine will quickly fall and sign a surrender, so that gas and oil can flow unhindered into the EU. Back to business as usual. Not that it was hindered much in the first place, to the effect that Russia is well funded by EU member state money flowing into the Kremlin coffers to fund this war. And now, as part result of that funding, Putin has declared that the port city of Mariupol has been liberated by bombardment, although how you liberate cinders, corpses and rubble is beyond me. And for good measure, Putin has sealed the surviving Ukrainian fighters and civilians in a steelworks tomb. Our leaders now have to really wake up and realise that this planet is a dangerous and nasty place at the moment, and we should not be allowing despots decades over which to build up their armouries while we ignore the basics of food, energy and defence, and spend all our time and money squabbling over pronouns.